models and in your AI. So you could have a very simple low poly model very far away, so you're saving on graphics processing, whereas very close you would want a high poly model because really visible to the player, really noticeable to the player. Same thing with the AI. You don't need a character way off in the distance to be doing some sort of advanced computing as far as AI. The player can't is hardly going to perceive that unit versus the enemy right in their face. Yeah, they're going to notice what they're doing. If they're not performing logical behavior, it's going to be really apparent to the end user. And so this is something that's used commonly in game development. Um, this idea of simplifying things that are less important to the player. So you couldn't really build a game where every character is behaving as accurately as possible. I mean, maybe you would want to, but the downside to that would be that you would be only be able to have a certain number of units. If you want more units, you're going to have to figure out a way of balancing the resources that they require. Another way you can look at this is trying to avoid behavior that looks mechanical. So once again, kind of keeping that feel of reality in the game. You want to try and not give away any uh, really visible indications that you're playing a game that really this is a computer that thinks in a very robotic manner. So, for instance, in Red Alert 2, they're really famous for having these little sayings that the units would spout out whenever you selected them, and they would have a series of them. So it wasn't always the exact same greeting. So for one, it made the player feel like, oh wow, I'm really in control of this unit. They're saluting me or they're saying, aye aye sir, like ready to serve. Secondly, it wasn't the exact same saying, so there was some variety. It made it feel more lifelike. It wasn't, hi sir, I'm ready to serve you. Hi sir, I'm ready to serve you. It makes it feel like more dynamic and less repetitive to the end users. The next point I want to bring up is the idea of having AI that's able to make choices. So, just like I said with the audio cues, and just like I said with um, some of the other aspects of the game, you want to give your AI options to do different things. Um, you don't want it, once again, to feel like it's the same thing over and over again to the player. You know, as a human being, if you're presented with a problem, you're going to brainstorm and you're going to come up with several different solutions. Now, obviously, computers can't do that. They have to act in very deterministic ways. But what they can do is have a series of different options available to them. So, in the case of a simple skirmish between the player and a group of enemies, some different strategies could be: one, let's all attack the player; two, let's all kind of defend and stay back; three, let's kind of just hold our ground; four, like some of us can attack, some of us can hold our ground; five, maybe some of us will retreat while the others attack. So there's all these different options with how the enemies could interact with the player. Instead of always having everybody attack the player nonstop, it gets to be kind of boring. It can be really exciting, but after a while, it kind of loses its variety. You get a lot better experience if you kind of have your highs and lows. Similar to movies, you don't want to be at a blockbuster movie where it's nonstop action for 2 hours. It's great to have action for maybe 20 minutes, and then you need, a low period where you're kind of building up the story and, moving to the next conflict, and then, you get into the high-paced action again. Same thing with games. You want variety to keep the player immersed. Um, you also want the behavior not to be random. So you want variety, but you don't want to feel to the player that like their actions have no um, impact on how the AI is behaving. So things that seem logical should be um, first and foremost choice of the AI. You don't want things that, while may offer some variety, aren't really, you know, the best, the most logical thing to the player to have. So in the case of one game, Half-Life 2, this can be done by having scripted different sort of um, options for the AI to take throughout the game. So in a particular environment, you may have a script that's running that can allow the AI to have multiple different options available to them. And you can just fire it off like, okay, this time I'm going to choose option one. Next time this scene is run, maybe I'll choose option two. And so it gives variety. If the player happened to die, they don't see the exact same thing again. It's slightly different. Helps them feel like it's a real environment that they're participating in. And so depending on your game, there may be different strategies that are available to you. So in the case of a real-time strategy game, you really do need a very detailed AI that is completely computer generated. You can't possibly script an entire real-time strategy game. You might be able to script parts of it, so what we talked about in previous chapters, where you may have an order in which the units are created, but you can't definitively say like, okay, you're going to always build the same units, you're always going to attack at a certain time. It's going to feel very confined to the player. It's more important for the computer to kind of be dynamically generating its strategy on the fly based on current conditions. And the alternative to that is, especially used a lot in first-person shooters, is the idea of scripting encounters. Most first-person shooters are in very narrow spaces or confined spaces, so it's really kind of easy to predict what is going to happen in that space. There's not as much options allowed for the player as far as movement. Therefore, you can script the behavior that you want, or you can script the variety of behavior that you want very accurately. And two games that kind of do this really well are Half-Life 2 and Medal of Honor Pacific Assault. And I will mention that in many first-person shooters, they also have the idea of further optimization where, maybe there are 10 enemies on screen that are rendered, but only a couple of them are actually active AI at any one time, the ones that are engaging the player, firing at them. There may be others that are in the distance that are kind of just there for the ambience, you would say. And so that's another thing that you could take into account. Maybe you can script many of the enemies, but then there are several that are acting dynamically, so that you get that feel of this large battle going on, and you get the feel of being actively engaged very deeply, while not having to have the sacrifices of either. So really robotic behavior or really time-consuming processing for all your units. And so that's also commonly used in real-time strategy games. Some other things that you can think about, they talk about the Battle for Middle-earth, where you can put kind of like an emotion system in, so audio cues, animations, things that are very simple that can make it seem like this world is more enhanced, is really feels more realistic than it truly is. And so, like I said, for real-time strategy games, the general attack plan is that you're not going to be able to script everything. You're going to have to give the AI some sort of metrics to determine what's the best situation, or given the situation, what's the best action to do. They've also found that while in general, it's really simple for the AI to make the most logical choice, it may not always be the most intuitive thing to the player. Something like always going for higher ground will start to look a little strange to the player because, maybe humans, we don't interpret the same way that computers interpret, the situation. We're used to, a little more variety. We don't think like actual generals. And so, having some variety in those actions is also a good idea. So, what can we do that actually implies this intelligence? So we've talked about scripting, the idea of, having actions or having a series of actions that make it look like, wow, this enemy is really thinking smartly. No, they're not thinking smartly. You've been confined into a certain sort of interaction or a certain